Ladies, gentlemen, and officers of the Royal Navy, I am Yusril, the game is World of Warships, and it is the 30th of September 2017. The second phase of clans has arrived, the clan base. This offers a string of economic benefits to joining a clan as the naval base develops. More XP per battle, cheaper research, lower servicing costs, all very handy. With clans have come clan wars. Wargaming have announced the rule set for the first season, and oh boy, it's going to be a very different metagame to the one we're used to in Random. 7v7, tier 10 only one battleship per team and no carriers. Whether it's good or bad, well, there's currently a lot of rather energetic debate going on about that. This video's my early reckoning of what the Clan Wars rule set is going to do to the metagame, and maybe an opinion or two. Maybe. If you've no tier 10s, then fret not, for anyone who has played a random battle with a tier 8 or higher ship will be lent a destroyer, cruiser and battleship for Clan Wars use only, so people won't suddenly be jumping into these ships in random battles. Initially, these ships are going to be Shimakaze, Zhao and Grosse Kurfürst, but this might change as time goes on. It's worth noting that the tier 8 battle requirement means that anyone playing in Clan Wars should have some experience of high tier play. Of course, that experience might be one game in an Enterprise or a Tirpitz that they bought on their second day and took into a 6 to 8 spread match, but the clans do get to pick their teams, so if somebody like that is in a clan battle, then it's that clan's fault for taking them, and frankly they've only themselves to blame for what's likely to happen next. It should also be noted that rental ships won't be able to mount camouflage, so non-rental ships will have a small edge in stealth. Very small, to the point where I have to wonder why Wargaming bothered with that restriction. It's the removal of carriers that's the big change, and oh boy, this changes things. It really changes things, even before we get into a battle. In random battles, a lot of cruisers and battleships, even some destroyers, are at least partially spec'd for flak. They'll be loading some combination of defensive AA, manual AA, advanced and basic firing training, anti-air mods on the ships, because even a tier 8 strike package can put severe hurt on an unprepared ship, never mind a tier 9 or 10. But with no bombers or fighters on the horizon, all of these skills and abilities suddenly lose a lot of their value. The most significant, of course, is that defensive anti-air and manual anti-air are now useless, unless you really, really want that spotter plane dead. Cruisers will replace DFAA with hydroacoustic search. Gearing and Grozhevoy get their speed boosts back. That in turn will knock on to torpedo attacks. You now have to assume that an enemy cruiser will have its hydro running when you're planning your torpedoes. The classic stealth attack from a solo destroyer, well, let's be honest here, it probably won't work, except maybe as area denial or as a way of briefly herding the enemy. Beyond that, it's now easier to take main battery mods, or, since you're no longer taking, say, manual anti-air, what about fire prevention, or basics of survivability, maybe jack of all trades and high alert, all those useful little mods and skills that you might not have taken in random because of the need to at least partially prepare for an air raid. I suspect fires are going to be noticeably less effective in Clan Wars once people start stacking some of these skills and mods. It might even rein in Zhao and Conqueror. Maybe. Perhaps. On a good day. Leaving that aside, there's also the question of what these rules are going to mean for team compositions and what that is going to do to gameplay. The initial team comp I thought of was the Bulldozer, 1 battleship, 4 cruisers, and a couple of gunboat destroyers as pickets and smoke generators, and I suspect that's the way most people will have thought to start with. The single battleship, well, unless the nerf bat is swung between now and the season's start, it's going to be Conqueror for most people. She has almost cruiser-level stealth. Her 419mm armour piercing will still overmatch the bows and smash the citadels of 6 out of the 7 ships she's likely to face in a match. That's when she bothers firing it, because that high explosive round she gets. Conqueror's also decently armoured against anything up to a battleship's main battery, and even when the enemy do start trying to burn her down, she has the infamous new boat button. As for the rest of the battleships, Yamato and Montana are, I suspect, going to be less popular. Yamato's usual selling point over other battleships, besides being that, is the penetration and overmatch capability of her 460mm guns. Except the overmatch is only an advantage against other battleships with their 32mm bows, because every Tier 10 battleship gun overmatches cruiser bow armour, and, well, the Hotel only has 9 barrels in her main battery. Montana? Well, Montana does pack 12 barrels, and she gets better armour piercing than Conqueror, but she's got much worse high explosive, and her usual selling point, her absolutely brutal flak, is irrelevant. There are no carriers in Clan Wars, therefore there are no roving aircraft, and the threat that the flak is there to deal with isn't there. Kurfürst, however, well, she might challenge Conqueror for the battleship slot. She's much less stealthy, but she's far more conventionally tanky, and she's capable of being very tough to put down if she goes full fireproof. But I suspect people are going to go for the Conqueror more often than not, if they actually have a player who has a Conqueror, because of course that's the other limiting factor. Cruisers, well, you can pick to taste really. I only have one Tier 10 cruiser myself, Minotaur, and she's something of an oddball, so I'm not really in a good position to comment. As for destroyers, if we accept that Shimakaze is largely neutralised thanks to the prevalence of Hydro, that leaves the gunboats, and really any of them. Z-52 packs Hydro for more early warning on torpedoes and charging down smoke clouds. The Russians have got raw speed and their 130mm railguns. Gearing has got joint best in tier stealth, the best smoke generator of the bunch, long-range torpedoes as formation breakers, and her rapid-fire 5-inch guns for close work. You can pretty much take your pick. But what about alternate team compositions? Credit to Siraku over at the WoW subreddit for getting me thinking on these lines. If one Shimakaze's torpedoes won't achieve very much, what about saturation? 7 Shimikazes, and remember that everyone is getting the Turbo Stripper as a lone ship, means 21 launchers and 105 tubes. Assuming Hydro is going to be almost constantly in play, the detection range of the torpedo is now irrelevant, so personally I'd load accelerated Type 93s. 67 knots out to 16 kilometres means that most of the squadron can stand off at about 13-14 kilometres, which is out of even the Moskva's radar range, and then unleash a veritable carnival every 2 minutes. 105 torpedoes arriving at the same area at the same time. Gonna get some epic torpedo beat videos if nothing else. The counter to these little bundles of fun and jail time? Easy. Japanese destroyer flak is rubbish, so just park a squadron nearby to spot and... no carriers. That's problematic. Absent aircraft, the only things that can actually keep up with a Sierra-mic'd Shimakaze are Khabarovsk and a Sierra-mic'd Grozhevoy. Of course, if you do go herring off at 40 knots, chasing Little Miss Speed Freak, you're running away from your fire support, and you're running towards the enemy, which means you're likely going to get surrounded and ganked away from your teammates, and yes, I know the 12.7cm gun isn't brilliant compared to the Russians, but when you're outnumbered 3 or 4 to 1, it suddenly doesn't matter quite so much. And of course, 2 minutes later, the surviving Kazes will have reloaded, relocated, re-stealthed, and now they can stage a repeat performance. And not the fun kind either. About the only thing a bulldozer team could do against this composition is grit its teeth, torpedo beat through the control points, and hope that territory control swings the battle, because if the Shimikazes don't make any mistakes, then the bulldozers won't have anything to shoot at for most of the game, and I'm not sure that will constitute fun for the bulldozer team, but it will probably be a win for them unless the Shimikazes can connect significant numbers of torpedoes. So what could beat 7 Shimikazes and have a decent chance against a bulldozer team? Well, how about 3 radar Minotaurs and 4, well, Z-52s would be ideal, but Gearings and Grozhevoys could work as well. That gives you smoke, decent amounts of hydro on relatively agile ships for torpedo evasion, and potentially 12 minutes of radar coverage that extends past anyone's detection range. So, when the detection warning pops, you fire up the radar, lock onto whatever's spotted you, as does everyone else nearby, and hello cutie, you're 1 kilometre inside the escape range of the radar, and there are lots of rapid-fire guns pointed at you. Have fun. The catch, of course, is that you're going to lose a lot of torpedo power against the bulldozers. In particular, you're going to have to finesse your range. Minotaur, 52 and Groj all have 10km range torpedoes, so you'll be launching beyond max range at closing targets, or else risk wandering within a DM or a Minotaur's radar range yourself. Even then, you'd still have to get within radar range of a Moskva to get the shot, and that's before you consider how to handle any picket ships without the main enemy force locking on and wrecking you. You'd probably have to use aggressive radar from the Minotaurs rather than the more common scan-on detection approach that we took with the Shimikazes earlier, and some smoke firing from the destroyers. And to beat that composition, you start swinging back to the bulldozer builds. You take more radar, you take heavier guns, heavier ships, you cut the destroyers back to the picket role. There is perhaps more potential for variety in this new rule set than some have suggested. Of course, everything above is theoretical. We won't have conclusive practical until it goes live, and the competitive clans, and the not-so-competitive clans, have had a chance to try out the various builds. Right, let's get on to the controversial bit. Carriers. More accurately, their absence. The first point I want to make is that it's not a good thing that Wargaming felt it necessary to pull a whole ship type from the rule set. It highlights just how disproportionate the influence of a carrier can be, and just how badly they need a rework. There are two big problems that I can see with carriers. The first is that they provide spectacularly good reconnaissance. Even in a 12v12, a good carrier driver, and I make no claims to this by the way, will be providing good intelligence to his team, but it's limited by the need to use those same squadrons in other roles, and the simple fact that there are considerably more enemies to keep track of than squadrons to do the tracking. In 7v7, there are less ships to keep track of, and critically, less non-carrier ships than a Hakuryu has air squadrons, so fog of war? What fog of war? Even more than radar, radio position finding and hydro, this alone can shut down any prospect of a flank attack unless your own carrier can keep you unspotted. And even then, the mere fact that your friendly carrier is loitering aircraft over an empty grid square is probably going to tip your hand just a bit. It also has other effects. Between spotting and strikes, a ship that tries to operate without adequate anti-air cover is basically dead. Destroyer flank attacks? Suicide. That sneaky mid or late game cap to turn a game around? Nice knowing you. Those ninja teams I discussed earlier, with minimal flak and no air cover? Have fun. Teams end up forced into a particular composition, and we've seen this in the 9v9 competitions like King of the Sea. You have to take a carrier, because if you don't and the enemy does, oh, it's not going to be pretty. Stealth is mostly out of the question, so instead you configure for firepower, flak and fortitude, which means the bulldozer composition, battleships, cruisers, maybe one gearing for smoke and a bit more defensive anti-air, because the usual destroyer roles of flanking and scouting are done better by the carrier's planes. Ships that detach from the main group will get spotted and blammed, so they're gonna have to blob up, and then the blobs smash into each other, which is a perfectly valid strategy, don't get me wrong on that. But the problem is that just the mere possibility of running into a carrier forces you into this one broad strategy, this one broad composition, this one broad approach. This shutdown, this straitjacketing, this stricture of strategy slams us right back to the good old days of Ranked Season 6, when the question was, who had the better Belfast? Allowing CVs in their present state will turn that question into, who has the better carrier? That simultaneously throws a massive load onto the carrier player and renders 6 other players somewhat less relevant, which doesn't sound like great fun for anyone, frankly. As much as I don't like the idea of taking a ship type out, it's probably less bad than letting a ship as powerful as Midway or Hakuryu run rampant in a 7v7. Better perhaps would be a rework of the line of sight mechanics so that indirect spotting didn't give perfect information. Flanking would still be difficult, but at least it wouldn't be suicidal. Even better, I think, would be a redesign of the carriers. But that's another topic, not to mention only a vague idea at best, and even if I had a solid design, and Wargaming agreed with it, and everyone else thought it was the best thing since sliced bread, there probably wouldn't be time to get it into the game before Clan v Clan started anyway. Overall, well, plus points, it's good to have proper team battles back in the mainstream game, and tying it to clans and their economic benefits will hopefully encourage people to take part, and nudging the rule set from time to time does bring some variety to the game. Downers? Well, the major community tournaments, most notably Supremacy League and King of the Sea, use a 9v9 tournament format with varying restrictions on things like smoke and US destroyers. I'd have preferred that. It allows Clan Wars to act as a feeder for the majors and eases the transition for people wanting to get into top competitive play. But for that you would need larger clans, which means you'd need less clans, and therefore less teams would be in the mix, especially with the small clans in game at the moment. Hopefully this can be changed for Season 2 once clans are more established and have bigger rosters. A larger team would also, hopefully, mitigate the influence of carriers, although I suspect they'd still be disproportionately powerful. The one battleship limit is something else I've got my doubts about. Maybe nudge up to 2 per team. That way a careless cruiser is more likely to get flanked and blammed, and Yamato's overmatch capability gets a bit more of her value back. Montana's still not a great choice, there's still no significant air presence in game, but that does at least give 3 out of the 4 battleships a decent raison d'etre. Of course, we still don't know what the prizes for top performers will be, or even if there'll be any, and how the economy, particularly the oil supply, is going to work. Hopefully Wargaming will spill the beans on that shortly. Overall opinion? I'm intrigued, but I'm holding judgment at the moment. I've not had a chance to play the format. On the other hand, I am happy to see team battles back. I've got some doubts about the rule set, but the big takeaway point from all this really isn't about the clan wars themselves. It's about the carriers. The whole eruption is basically a giant warning sign. 100-foot letters of fire, the screaming of the lost and the damned, skies of blood, etc., etc. No, this isn't just another Tuesday on the boards. Carriers probably need a ground-up redesign and rework. What they're for, how they do it, and how they're countered needs to be completely redone. But that's a topic for another day. Regardless, I have been Yusril. That has been my first take on Clan v Clan Season 1, what we know about it so far, and until next time, farewell.